there are hundreds of requirements that we have to hew to and conform to be compatible with the ISS and to meet criteria for being attached to the ISS. The dry process is literally you break them down one at a time and you go read them one at a time, and your team, my team, interacts with the ISS team and their particular counterparts, and at that level they agree on the meaning of the requirement and they agree on what's known as a verification method for that requirement. It's not enough just to say I acknowledge that requirement and I'll do that. You have to agree on the verification method, and that's actually where the negotiation is. And so all of those requirements, known as the IRD requirements, all of them are negotiated at the verification method level. And sometimes there's multiple rounds of do we have it right? Have we agreed on this? And sometimes there are go-backs when you find a year or two later that what you agreed to do, you can't do for some reason. And so sometimes you have to go back and adjust that agreement. How was the safety review process important? I would make the case that it was almost more important than the IRD process. We learned probably more than anything we could learn about the ISS and how to interact with it in that SRP forum, safety review process SRP forum. In that forum, we learned what it would really take to convince a team of JSC, very senior JSC people, that we in fact had a safe design, we knew how to fly our safe design, and we were safe to fly to the space station. And in that forum, we learned things that essentially are either written at such a high level in the IRD, or the IRD is just outright silent. We learned things that we had to fold back into the design of Cygnus, all the while we're racing through the Cygnus development and design review process. So the SRP process was, I would make a case for central to the development of Cygnus, not peripheral to the development of Cygnus. And one of our challenges on the COTS program was that we didn't recognize that for about the first 12 months into the program. We did not understand that. Shortly after I came onto the project in October of 2008, and then there was an SRP Phase 1 meeting, I believe it was, early the next year. And that meeting was a disaster because we didn't understand and we weren't prepared. And we had a third party that we thought this third party would just gather data from our standard way of doing things and could somehow magically communicate to the SRP that we were going to be safe. That was a disaster and didn't work. And it took a lot of rolling up of the sleeves, active listening, parsing things back, going back to the design drawing board, changing things, explaining them again. We had to go through that iteration probably a half a dozen times before we got certain aspects of Cygnus to where we believed, and our counterparts on the SRP believed, that we could successfully advocate we're safe. It was clear after 6 months that there hadn't been enough sharing from, flow from JSC to orbital ATK personnel, and orbital ATK personnel listening and understanding, such that on the orbital ATK side we grasped the magnitude of activity necessary to get through the SRP process. And so I got exposed just ever so slightly to it before showing up at SRP Phase 1. And in SRP Phase 1, the strange thing I observed was Orbital had hired another support subcontractor to canvas Cygnus engineering and to craft draft hazard analyses. And literally that third party was presenting these draft hazard report analyses to the SRP, and they knew nothing about what Cygnus was and what we were trying to do. And then my engineering team that was in that room at the SRP was listening to those draft hazard reports and saying, that's not right, and that's not what we're going to do. So what I learned at that moment in time was that my systems engineering team was not engaged with the SRP process and the safety stakeholders at JSC. And so it became an effort on my part to drive more systems engineering into the safety features in the Cygnus architecture. And so I guess what I'm trying to emphasize is it took, like I said, almost 12 months for Orbital HK to grasp that that's what was missing. What was missing was the systems engineering and the systems engagement in the SRP process. And by example, I'll explain what was wrong. You could not simply hire a subcontractor and say, go write my hazard reports, and have the subcontractor go talk to subsystems engineers and magically come up with hazard reports. Those are all going to be disconnected as opposed to an integrated whole. You actually need to do the safety systems engineering starting from the top and working down. And it wasn't after we had that disaster at SRP Phase 1 that I realized that we had to go put a whole lot of effort into this. And so between Phase 1 and Phase 3, I would say I spent probably 30-40% of my job on the program was being actively engaged with the systems engineering of the safety design features in the Cygnus architecture.